Hi everyone, welcome to Tom's Man Shed. Okay, so today's video is a bit of a history about where I'm sat now, the man shed itself. I started this channel about 4 months ago. The very first video was entitled Grandpa Builds a Gaming PC, so if you want to check that out, that was my very first one. And I've done sort of all the filming for them in this man shed itself. So I thought I'd better do, might be a bit of interest to people wanting to sort of build a shed or whatever, on the actual construction of it and the way it started life. Now, all this bit you can see here, all this teal coloured blue bit is an extension to the original shed. Now the original one is there behind me. You'll see through the white door there with the clock on it. That is the observatory. Now, it was built originally as an observatory at the end of 2004, so 15 years ago. I was thinking of doing this video the other day and I thought it was only about 13 years ago, but it's actually 15 years ago that we started building that. So I'm going to take you through the origins of it. Obviously I didn't have video at that time. Well, there was video obviously, but long before I'd even thought of doing any sort of YouTube daily, weekly vlog or whatever. So it's all in pictures, so I had to just do it as a slideshow. So I'll do sort of a narration over it and tell the construction of it with just pictures and narrative. Now I'm going to do it in 3 parts. I'm going to do the original construction of the observatory and the very tiny adjoining warm room. I'll explain that soon in part 1. And then part 2 I'll do the construction of this bit where I extended it by a big area last year. Did all that building myself. That was May last year, 2018. And then I'll finish off with part 3 about the observatory itself as it is now, with the telescopes that are in it now. So if you've any interest in astronomy, keep a lookout for part 3. I'll be running you through the mount and all the scopes on it. And then in the future we'll be doing one on an actual astrophotography session. I use it mainly for astrophotography, not visual astronomy. And there are obvious differences, but I'll run through them both in a later video, which will be dedicated to just on how we obtain images of galaxies, planets, the moon, whatever, and we'll have that as a separate video just to do with the telescopes. So without further ado, here's the story of the origin of this, the beginning bit, the back bit of this man shed. So here's how it started with construction of the observatory part. This is my brother-in-law Andrew, who's a builder, very skilled builder, and he said he'd build it for us. So here it is, breaking the hole for the pier originally. Now it's about 1 metre square, this hole, which was way too big. We didn't need to do it like this. It took far too much concrete. Half the size would have been adequate, and that's the pier going in. Now he said, oh, this will be solid enough. It was like an RSJ, a big thick RSJ with a platform welded on top, but in the end it turned out not to be. There was loads and loads of vibration from that pier, as I'll explain later. Now this is as far as Andrew got. The trouble with asking relatives to do it for you is things never get completed. So I asked my mate Colin from the Model Flying Club, who's a skilled joiner, if he'd do it, and he was in his 60s and that, but it was a nice summer, and he said yeah, why not, and he went ahead and started it. So there's the construction of the roof. Now these are the runners that the roof rolls back over my existing garage roof, which is there, the old garage roof. And so the roof on the observatory is in the closed position now. It rolls back over there. It's still in the closed position. They go back, the back of the garage, and a really big, thick, heavy supports holding that up. So basically they're just to hold the roof when it's in its open position. Now there's the pier, and it may look real strong iron as it is, but If you can imagine, if you twanged at the top of that, if you hit it with a hammer, it would vibrate like a tuning fork, and it did. And them tiny vibrations are no good for astronomy. So that's the carrying on the construction of it. And it was originally in its original state from Andrew for months until Colin took it over. So this is a few months later. That's the view from my loft of it well underway, the construction, and the roof in its closed position. The front bit, just behind that door, is the warm room. That's just like an 8-foot, that bit there that you can see with the workmate in it, is where I will sit with my computer controlling the telescope in the adjacent room. That's the floorboards going down, the joists laying on top of the concrete, on top of the visqueen. The pier's been painted black by now, and continuation of the joists going in. And that's the again over the old garage roof. They're getting it levelled up a bit. You can see it's really, really well made. He did a brilliant job of it, did Colin. Sorry about the bleep, message coming in on the phone. Again, there's the pier painted black with a piece of floorboard, piece of the flooring, proper flooring leaning against it. In the process of putting that in. All the visqueen on the walls ready, that's that blue plastic. Now I did all the wiring. That's near the door for the switches for the inside of the observatory. Now I've put MDF on the walls instead of plasterboard. Sorry, I put MDF. It's a good enough finish. It doesn't have to be glass. It's not a room we're living in, so MDF was tougher and more suitable, I thought. So that's the mains box going in. Mon style mains box with all the ELCB circuit breakers. And there you can see the adjoining warm room, the bit with the green carpet in. That bit is insulated in all the walls to keep it warm. So it didn't take much heating. The observatory has no insulation. You don't want any insulation in that because you want it same temperature as outside to stop condensation. There you see the guttering in place. So in the closed position, the guttering is there. It's like a little stub, goes round the movable roof, and that little stub corresponds to that hopper, and that just all the water goes down there, keeps it off the walls. That's again a view from the outside through the warm room into the telescope part itself, with my original scope, which is a Meade LX200, 12-inch Meade LX200. So there's the roof. It's been felted at this stage. Really good felting job by some local guys. And I've put metal in the runners to make it a bit tougher for the wheels to sit on. Now, it was never going to be a permanent feature, that fridge. I just put it in just to try it. Took up too much room in a confined space. But you can see how small my control room was, the warm room. That was it, something like 4 foot by 8 foot. And there's the telescope on its original pier, non-suitable pier because far too twangy. Like I say, if you hit the top of that, look through the telescope, it was moving miles. So we had to do something about that. And there it is. And again, I went for the, like most people do, for the biggest scope you can go for without getting totally into it. You're best going for a mount. Pick your mount first. And then pick your scopes. Again, I'll go into detail when I do the proper astronomy bit. You can see the red light on the wall there, as well as the neon strip. That's for use at night time. Now there's the roof in the open position. You can see it's taken the guttering with it and the little stub, just leaving the hopper down to the terminator just above the concrete. And like I said, that keeps all the rain off the walls. Again, that's it in the open position. There's my old trailer. It used to be a mobile DJ. All my DJ equipment stuff was in there. And that's it in its open position with the scope. Just a little bit. I couldn't do the roof any lower than that because it had to open over the back of the garage roof. But I have got surrounding houses, so it was fine anyway. I've got a big area of sky available, and there it is with the roof just clearing it. And you can sort of just about get it in there. So again, there is the roof in the closed position, and there's sort of 2 bolts on that you can lock it in that position from inside, and there it is slid back. There's 3 heavy duty rollers per side. It weighs a ton, that roof, because it's thick stuff, but it slides back reasonably easy by hand. There's no motor or anything. That's it, pretty much finished. Later on I did put some iron bars over that window because it is just perspex and it doesn't open. The extension does, that I'm sat in now. Now that's the warm room. Now as you can see, the table is edge on there. I have 2 monitors, one for each computer. One computer I can control the scopes with, and one for just surfing the net and doing other, playing games and stuff. And a TV above it. But that was it. That was the only place I had to sit, and I found it really cosy, and I was spending most of my time in there. So that was it, the original construction of the original observatory. Now, as it ended that, I said that was, you saw the actual room I had to sit in. Now that was what you call the warm room. The telescope room itself, you want no insulation in the walls for that, because you need that to be the same temperature or as close to the same temperature as outside. Otherwise you will get condensation in your telescope, particularly a telescope like that, a Schmidt Cassegrain, which do take a lot of cooling down. And that is a problem. If you have one of them, if you keep it in the house, if you've no observatory, and you take it outside to do your observing, it does take quite a long time to cool down, to become accustomed to the outside temperature. If you don't, you get eddies, air currents inside the tube, which can interrupt your viewing. So it's ideal being in an observatory because it's the same temperature as outside to a certain degree. If it's been a warm day, temperature builds up a bit in the observatory. But like I said, you don't want insulation in there because you don't want to be trapping heat in and keeping cold out. You want to get the cold into that room. So that big room where the telescope was had no insulation in it. As you see, the roof, the sliding roof is all open, and all behind the MDF panels was no fiberglass insulation. It's insulated in to a certain extent, being a cavity, so and having the MDF on the inside, but I didn't put any fiberglass in because I didn't want to keep heat in that room. But the adjoining room, the little 4x8 room where I sat controlling it, that was fully insulated. So all the walls, the ceiling, which was covered, and everything, because I wanted that to be a really nice warm little room. I have a little oil-fired radiator, oil-filled portable radiator that I heated it up with, and it hardly needed any heating whatsoever, being 8 before. So I could sit in there on the coldest of nights where it's below 0 outside, and which is ideal temperature for imaging in, because everything is really still. And inside I was in my own little world, 8 foot by 4 foot room, as happy as Larry and warm in that. And while I was imaging, I could watch the TV, which was mounted above the 2 monitors, and I spent many a happy year, right up to last year, in that room at night. Even when I wasn't doing any astronomy, if it was raining or whatever, I found myself, I was in, that was my little den. It's only 8 foot by 4 foot, but why sit in the house? My wife was on her own computer in the dining room, watching her, doing her own stuff on that. So I went in there playing games, usually War Thunder, watching TV, surfing the net in that nice little room, cheap to run and everything. But it, as you see, it was cramped, and after so many years, I was wanting something a bit bigger, like where I'm sat now. So like I said, that's for a later video. But I also brushed on then, I did mention about the pier. Now the pier for the telescope, as you'll see in these next set of pictures, is how I altered it. Apart from all the assurances of my brother-in-law, who was a great builder, the bit he did, like I say, it was weeks and weeks and weeks of asking him to complete it. He always had another job on. Because we were family, obviously didn't count so much, even though I was offering to pay him, and it never got completed, so that's why I asked Colin to do it. But apart from his assurances, great builder but not astronomer, and I had a suspicion that it wouldn't be strong enough, and I was right, and that like I say, it did vibrate like mad. So this is the method I used to reinforce the pier and make it absolutely solid. I'd retired at the time, but I still knew all my mates in British Gas, and I knew the lads on the in the distribution department, which are the guys who lay the mains in the road, and they got me a bit of an offcut of gas main, and it's really thick, as you'll see, thick-walled yellow plastic tubing, and that was used to reinforce it with concrete around the original pier. So this is how I did that. So this is how I reinforced it. Like I say, you can see how thick the walls are there, so plenty to hold the concrete. I cut the tube that far down to allow for some bolts that will take them out. You'll see them in a minute. So there's another view, ready to pour the concrete in. I've put 4 little brackets on the bottom, bolted to the original concrete, just to hold it steady while I pour the concrete in. There's 2 of the brackets, there's 2 the other side as well. I didn't actually get any pictures of the concrete pour, but again, I mixed it all myself by hand, no cement mixer. And there's the mount that I put in the top. They sit down in the concrete grips them, and then you take the wooden plate, which is just to hold them in position off, and then you lower that concrete, that metal plate that you see there, onto the top of them, and that holds the scope itself. So that tube there now is full of concrete. There's the plate in situ, bolted onto them bolts which are sat in the concrete. So you can imagine how solid that is now, and really firm. Another view of it there. So the wedge that I used later bolted to that, and again, that welding was done by me. There's the wedge in place, and that gives you like an equatorial alignment for a fork mounted scope. It doesn't work quite as good as an equatorial mount, a proper one. Of course, fork mounts are fine if you're just using it visually. But like I say, if you do want to do astrophotography, you have to get a wedge. Otherwise, you've got to use another thing called a rotator on the telescope. But so you're better off if you're thinking of astrophotography and just starting with a proper equatorial mount in its own right from the beginning. So that was the alterations to the pier to make it more solid. So that's how the telescope stayed for at least a couple of years. I did get another mount fairly soon after that, I think, and sold the LX200. But after about 5 or 6 years of everything running smoothly, being great, and I noticed the floor as I walked on it in the observatory part was moving, was bouncing up and down. I thought, oh my God, there's something vastly wrong here. When I pulled the vinyl flooring back, it was covered with a vinyl flooring. It was soaking wet underneath between the vinyl flooring and the top of the flooring, the wooden proper flooring, and it was black with mould and just disintegrating. So I had to rip the whole floor up, get everything out of there, all the vinyl floor and everything, and just rip the whole entire top sheet of flooring up to investigate what had gone wrong. Now this was about, I'm trying to think when it was, It was another heat wave, I remember vividly. It was something like, I'm not kidding, about 40 degrees in that room. That it was, when I was doing it, I was almost flaking out doing it because it was probably the hottest day of the year. And this was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So it had been up about, I think, about 6 or 7 years before this happened. And once I pulled all this flooring back, it was just crumbling. You could literally put it in your hand in places and just pull it apart, soggy. So it's obviously a lack of ventilation now. Under your floor at home, if you've got a wooden floor at home, as you look around the outside of your house, you'll see vents in the brickwork, which corresponds to the void under your floor between the joists, and that's what keeps your underfloor damp free. Lets any condensation out. Now, I hadn't thought of this when I built, when Colin built the thing. I think I actually put the flooring in, so I can't blame Colin for this in any way. But I hadn't thought about ventilation whatsoever. Now, it's too thin to put there's not enough room under that floor to put vents through to the outside in the conventional way, a brick up from the floor or above your damp course or whatever. So the only way I could think of ventilating it under that floor was venting it into the room itself. So you'll see in this next section of two or three pics that I drilled. You can get these things, I think they're called soffit vents, sort of for going around your roof, for ventilating your loft. They're about 4-inch diameter, white plastic louvered vents. You get a packet of about 10 of them for not much money at Screwfix. So I drilled between each set of joists, I drilled a 4-inch hole with a big rotary cutter that you put downlighters in with. And between every set of floorboard joists, there was a vent at each end. So all that underfloor was vented into the telescope room itself. So any condensation trapped under that floor could escape into the room. And I also drilled, the only bit I could drill through, like I said, I couldn't drill outside, it's just only on one layer of bricks outside, that's it. I drilled through into the garage two other holes, and that vents it into the garage as well. So plenty of fresh air movement under that floor, and since I did that, so 6 or 7 years ago, so sort of basically halfway between the original build and the time it is now that I'm filming this. So the original build was about 15 years ago, so it was about 6 or 7 years ago that this damp floor problem manifested itself. And later on in part 2 of this, when I'm building this part, I come across the same problem in the ceiling. I'll explain that as well. So if you are building a shed, always think about any sort of void where moisture and temperature can get trapped. So if you've got an underfloor void and you've got differences in heat as you have above floor level and the cold underfloor, and again in summer it will get hot under that bit, you will get condensation, and unless that condensation is somewhere to escape, you'll get damp problems, and that's going to rot your floor, which is exactly what it did. So this next few pictures is taken then as I renewed the floor, ripped threw all the old damp knackered stuff away and relaid all brand new flooring. Like I say, since then I've had no problem with damp, it's still as solid as a rock. So you can see there how horrible and black and damp them boards were. So they had to be ripped up and totally thrown away. Luckily it hadn't got down into the joists, they were still solid, so it was all confined to the tongue and grooved flooring. So I've put a bit more cement around there, just filling in some little gaps and that. They're the two holes I've drilled through into the garage. This bit is the garage part off, so that's getting a bit of air from the garage, which is well ventilated. These are two tubes, plastic tubes I put in. I thought I might as well do this at the time so I can feed wires down here. I hadn't thought of this on the first build. So I'll put these two drain pipes in, and once all the flooring is down, I can then shove wires down there from the wall and lead it to the scope under the floor. So that neatened up the wires a lot more. So again, I coated them all with wood preservative. Probably no need because they are pre-treated flooring panels anyway, but that's what I did. And here are those little vents I mentioned. It's just like a 4-inch hole drilled underneath, and each one corresponds to its own that void under the floor. So there's plenty of air movement now. Anything under that floor can escape. You can see the wires going down them two pipeline holes and then under the floor to come up at the scope. That's one of the vents. Close up, like I said, dead cheap from Builder Supply. Now I use them in the ceiling for the same reason as you'll see in part 2 of this video. So basically that's it. That's the end of part 1. That was the construction of the original observatory part and the little tiny warm room. And I spent the next well, I've been in here just over a year, this extension bit, so I spent the next like 14 years in that little room. Not living in there, obviously. It didn't have a toilet or anything, but many happy night. Just like I say, even when I wasn't doing any astronomy, I used to go into there, stick War Thunder on, have many an hour on War Thunder. I had a little tiny surround sound system. Not a tiny surround sound, a really good surround sound system that I'm still using now. But little heater in my own little world. It was great. But like I say, after so long, I was yearning for a bit more room. Other sort of that, I fancied a bit of 3D printing. There was nowhere to put a 3D printer, and I just fancied making the shed a bit bigger. It's been such a good success. So that's what I did. So I'll look out for the next part coming very soon. Part 2, the extension, last year's extension, all this new bit you see here. Of the I'll show you the construction of that, which I did all on my own, apart from the roofing. That'll be part 2. Like I said, that's coming up very soon, and I'll sort of finish off this trilogy with going in depth into the telescopes. So hope you enjoyed the construction of Manshed part 1. Catch you in part 2 very soon. I'll see you then. Bye for now.